Imagine being arrested just because your roommate is a different race from you. Well, that was the reality of life under Jim Crow in the US. Let's get smarter in seconds about Jim Crow. So Jim Crow was an umbrella term for the state-enforced racial segregation laws, customs, and practices across the United States, not just in the South. You may associate it with the colored-only and white-only signage, or maybe you've heard of the Montgomery bus boycotts. Well, that was a protest against Jim Crow laws. The name Jim Crow never actually appeared in legislation. It was a racial slur used against black people as early as the 1830s, and it came from minstrel shows. Minstrel shows were characterized by white performers using blackface to imitate and denigrate black people, our culture, our history, and our reality of oppression. Jim Crow laws included redlining, or the denial of financial services to a person based on their race or ethnicity, sundown towns, or the racist laws, intimidation, and violence that dictated that non-white people had to leave white neighborhoods by sundown, which existed all over the US, including California. Anti-miscegenation laws, which were bans on interracial marriage, relationships, or cohabitation. That means living together, which existed so that the white race could stay pure. Segregated workplaces, which diversity, equity, and inclusion programs work to address, which is a reminder that people who are anti-DEI are just pro-segregation. And lynchings, acts of terrorism used to intimidate, mutilate, and murder black people. Jim Crow was clearly cruel and oppressive, but it was justified by white supremacist ideology. Specifically, the white supremacist lie that black, indigenous, and non-white people are inherently inferior, less intelligent, less capable, and less deserving than white people. And legally, racial segregation and Jim Crow laws were justified by the 1896 Supreme Court decision of Plessy versus Ferguson. The court held that so long as segregated facilities like those for transportation, education, and healthcare were equal, then segregation was constitutional. But let's get real, a practice created under the premise that non-white people are inherently inferior was never concerned with creating facilities that were separate but equal. These ideas benefited white people, and accordingly, many were led to believe that for white people to prosper, they needed to live, learn, and work in separate environments. Documents like the 1925 Use of Negro Manpower in War Memorandum issued by the Army War College repeated these white supremacist lies. It literally said that black people were inherently inferior, inherently less intelligent, and couldn't have jobs like being a pilot. And that white supremacist ideology is the same white supremacist ideology that has present-day politicians saying things like DEI caused a plane crash, or that black people need different vaccine schedules. And we have to remember that slavery and Jim Crow were not very long ago. I have a photograph of my last enslaved ancestor, P.W. Bobo, and my grandmother was a child when she had to flee Little Rock, Arkansas to Altadena because of a lynching. My parents were alive when the last Jim Crow laws were being enforced. Jim Crow is within our living memory, and that's why we must be vigilant in the fight against white supremacy and racism.
Smarter in seconds.